The dust was still settling when Daniel Cooper pulled into the long gravel drive that led to his family's ranch. 2 weeks away, and that's all he'd been. 2 weeks visiting his sister after her surgery, 2 weeks during which his neighbor promised to keep an eye on the place. Yet as the truck crested the hill, Daniel froze. A huge white sign stood planted in front of his fence line. For sale. Open lot, priced to move. Below it, a smaller one read, HOA approved development zone. For a long minute, he thought he'd taken a wrong turn. Then he noticed the oak tree near the gate, the one his grandfather had carved their initials into. No mistake. This was his land, all 40 acres of it. And now 3 unfamiliar SUVs were parked in his pasture. A pair of men in dress shirts were walking the boundary with clipboards. A woman in a cream blazer pointed toward his barn as if giving orders. Daniel's jaw tightened. He killed the engine and stepped out, boots crunching on the gravel. "Can I help you?" he called. The woman looked over her sunglasses and smiled the kind of smile that hides teeth. "You must be Mr. Cooper," she said brightly. "We're with the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. You'll be happy to know the property's already under conditional sale. We just need you to clear out any remaining personal items." He blinked. "Conditional what? This land's not for sale." Her tone stayed smooth. "According to our records, the deed transfer was executed last Thursday. The association purchased your parcel to expand community amenities." She waved her clipboard as if it were scripture. Daniel took 2 steps forward. "Lady, my grandfather built that barn in 1954. I've got every tax receipt since. So unless this HOA started buying dreams, you've been conned." One of the men beside her shifted nervously. "Ma'am, maybe we should—" But she cut him off. "Mr. Cooper, hostility isn't necessary. You'll receive a relocation incentive once escrow closes." Then she turned away, heels clicking across the dry earth. Daniel stared after them, heart pounding. Relocation incentive. They were talking like he was already gone. He yanked the sign from the ground, tossed it into the bed of his truck, and drove straight to the county recorder's office. Inside the stale-smelling room, lined with metal filing cabinets, clerk Betty Nunez looked up from her computer. "Danny Cooper? Well, aren't you supposed to be on vacation?" "Was," he said, setting the sign on her counter. "Someone sold my land while I was gone." Her eyebrows rose. "That's a new one." They pulled the property file together. The screen showed a scanned document labeled Quit Claim Deed, executed May 12th. Daniel's stomach dropped. His own signature stared back at him, perfect cursive, identical down to the loop in the C. But he hadn't signed anything. Betty clicked her tongue. "Notary looks legit. Susan Vale." Daniel knew that name. "Marjorie Vale, HOA president. Her daughter, maybe?" He leaned closer. "Betty, can you print that out for me?" She hesitated. "I shouldn't, but I remember your granddad." He wired the town's first generator. "I'll print it." As the printer hummed, Daniel felt the floor tilt beneath him. Someone inside the HOA had forged his name, notarized it, and filed it at the county, while he was 300 miles away. That night, the wind carried the smell of rain and betrayal. Daniel sat at his kitchen table, papers spread around the flickering lantern light. Each receipt, tax bill, survey map. Proof that his family had owned this land long before any HOA. The barn creaked as if his grandfather's ghost agreed. He called the sheriff's office, but Deputy Mills sighed. "If there's a recorded deed, it's civil. You'll need a lawyer." So he called Ellen Kerrigan, a sharp-witted attorney who'd handled a boundary dispute for him years back. When she answered, he simply said, "They sold my land while I was out of town." By morning, Ellen was at the ranch. She walked the perimeter, reading every stake the HOA surveyors had planted. "They're pushing your fence 30 feet east," she said. "That's deliberate." Inside the truck cab, she spread the forged deed beside Daniel's genuine title. "See here? They used the pre-digitization format, pulled your old signature from the 2011 refinance file. Someone with county-level access." Daniel stared at the ink. "Marjorie Vale's daughter notarized it." Ellen nodded slowly. "Then the president's fingerprints are all over this. They spent the next week gathering evidence." Betty slipped them copies of the filing timestamps. The notary log showed Susan Vale signing 6 deeds that same day, all belonging to owners who'd recently moved or were elderly. A pattern. Then came the letter. Certified mail, embossed with the HOA seal, notice to vacate. Daniel laughed bitterly. They're evicting me from my own house. Ellen said, Good, let them. Every notice they send strengthens our case. Still, Daniel couldn't sleep. At dawn, he walked the pasture, tracing the fence line where his father used to set rabbit traps. He remembered the way his mother's voice echoed across the hills during harvest. This wasn't just property. It was memory fenced in wood and wire. He picked up his phone and started recording a video diary, dates, names, photos of documents, evidence for court and for himself. 3 days later, trucks arrived. Men in reflective vests began measuring the barn. Daniel stepped onto the porch. You touch that building, I'll have you for trespass. One of them muttered, Talk to Mrs. Vale. Marjorie herself appeared, sunglasses gleaming. Mr. Cooper, you're in violation of Section 12. The HOA now manages this parcel. Daniel held up the notarized deed copy. Funny, because this signature's fake. Her smile faltered. You're making a mistake challenging us. He looked past her to the cameraman filming the supposed demolition for the HOA's social page. Yeah, Daniel said. The mistake was yours. He raised his phone, recording her face, the trucks, the workers. Say hi to the county prosecutor. Marjorie's expression cracked for the first time. She spun on her heel and ordered everyone to stand down. That evening, Daniel emailed every clip, document, and timeline to Ellen. Her reply came at midnight. Got it. Filing injunction first thing tomorrow. By the end of the week, the county courthouse buzzed with whispers about the Cooper land fraud. The judge granted a temporary restraining order, blocking any transfer or demolition until ownership was proven. Ellen told him quietly. That's phase 1. Next we dig, they subpoenaed the HOA's internal records. Half of them came back missing. The rest showed payments to a consulting firm registered in another state. The address led to a P.O. box, and the box was rented under Marjorie Vale's husband's name. When local journalist Rick Holloway called asking about rumors of fraudulent deeds, Daniel hesitated. Print whatever's public, he said. Truth doesn't need a script. 2 days later, the headline hit, Rancher claims HOA sold his land without consent. Marjorie called him that night, her voice shaking with rehearsed calm. You didn't have to involve the media, Daniel. We could have settled privately, he replied. You sold half this town's land behind their backs. We're done privately. Then he hung up. Outside, lightning flashed beyond the hills. For the first time in weeks, Daniel felt a spark of hope. The next morning, the courthouse parking lot was half full of pickup trucks and coffee thermoses. Daniel waited by the steps while Ellen filed the injunction paperwork. When she came back out, the look in her eyes said she'd found something. Remember those 6 other deeds Susan Vale notarized? She asked. 3 of them were for lots now being flipped to a developer called Pine Ridge Estates. Guess who owns that company? Daniel's pulse quickened. Marjorie's husband. The puzzle was snapping together faster than either expected. The Vales had been using their HOA positions to buy low, sell high, except they weren't buying at all. They were forging transfers, then laundering the profits through shell corporations. The Cooper's ranch was simply the biggest piece. Ellen laid out the plan, gather every homeowner who'd received strange mailings, pull their records, and bring them to a public meeting. If we go at this alone, they'll drown us in legalese, she said. But if the whole town sees the pattern, they'll have to act. That evening, Daniel drove the winding road that bordered Willow Creek. He stopped at the Petersons, a retired couple who'd lived there since the 70s. Their kitchen smelled of coffee and fear. We got a letter, too, Mrs. Peterson said, sliding an envelope across the table. Said our membership dues doubled because of infrastructure improvements. We never signed up for an HOA. By sundown, Daniel had a list of 8 families with similar stories. Some had fake late fee notices, others knew boundary maps that trimmed their acreage. Each document carried the same neat notary stamp, S. Vale. The next night they met at the old feed store. Folding chairs, thermos lids clicking open, tension thick in the air. Ellen stood at the front, explaining how a forged deed worked and what could be done. Daniel watched the faces, anger, disbelief, exhaustion. Then he spoke quietly. They picked the wrong town. The room broke into applause that carried out into the parking lot. 2 days later, the county investigator arrived at the HOA office with a warrant. Daniel waited in his truck across the street. Through the blinds, he saw officers removing computers, boxes of files, and one particularly shiny desktop printer, the same model used for county forms. By sunset, the rumor mill spun faster than a storm vane. Local news vans parked along the main road, reporters knocking on doors. Marjorie vanished for 3 days, claiming she was traveling for business. When she finally appeared, she held a press conference outside the HOA clubhouse, insisting everything was a misunderstanding. Daniel watched the clip from his kitchen. Her voice trembled only once, when a reporter asked about Pine Ridge Estates. That night, a pickup rolled slowly past Daniel's gate. Headlights off! He stepped onto the porch with a flashlight and watched the tail lights disappear down the hill. It didn't scare him, but it told him the Vales were desperate. Ellen called the next morning. They'll try to settle before the criminal side catches up. Don't sign anything. I won't, he said, but I'll keep recording. Weeks passed in a blur of depositions and discovery requests. Daniel spent nights scanning documents while the barn owl called from the rafters. He kept the foreclosure notice pinned to the wall above his desk, a reminder of what started it all. One afternoon, Betty from the recorder's office phoned. Danny, you'll want to see this, she whispered like someone afraid of walls hearing. They tried to backdate another deed yesterday. Used your mother's old parcel number. He drove down immediately. The fake document was sloppier this time, wrong ink, incorrect spacing, but still dangerous. Ellen added it to the evidence stack. Each attempt strengthens the fraud charge, she said. They're digging their own grave. The following Monday, the grand jury convened. Daniel sat quietly as Ellen presented the timeline, emails between the Vales, bank transfers, notary logs. When she finished, the prosecutor nodded slowly. Plenty here to indict. By that evening, the story had gone statewide. Local HOA under investigation for property fraud. Cameras showed police leading Marjorie Vale out of her office. Her once perfect hair matted by the wind. Daniel didn't cheer. He just exhaled for the first time in months. But justice, as Ellen warned, moves slower than rumor. The HOA board tried to distance themselves, appointing an interim president who promised transparency. Yet letters still arrived demanding fees. Daniel collected each one like a trophy, stamping the date in red ink. Evidence, he said. Meanwhile, Pine Ridge Estates filed for bankruptcy. Developers backed out, citing title uncertainty. One of them phoned Daniel privately. We were told your land was clear. I'm sorry, Mr. Cooper, we were lied to. Join the line, he replied. Then came the civil suit. Marjorie's lawyers argued she'd been misled by subordinates, that Susan's notary stamp had been borrowed. Ellen countered with video of Marjorie directing surveyors on Daniel's property, the forged deed in her hand. The courtroom murmured when the footage played. During cross-examination, Ellen asked one question that cracked everything open. Mrs. Vale, if you truly believe this land belonged to the HOA, why did you transfer it into a company owned by your husband? Silence. Then the judge's gavel. The fraud case moved forward and restitution talks began. But Daniel wanted something deeper than money. He wanted the truth on record, the whole town to know how close they'd come to losing everything. So he sat down with Rick, the journalist who'd first broken the story, and told it from start to finish. Rick's article ran under the headline, The Rancher Who Fought the HOA and Won. Within a week, messages poured in from across the country, people who'd faced similar abuse, thanking him for standing up. Daniel read each one slowly, humbled and a little stunned. Spring came early that year. The pastures turned green again, calves stumbling after their mothers. Workers repaired the old fence where survey stakes once stood. Ellen visited with a folder of final orders. Courts reinstated full title. Counties refunding your legal fees. And the HOA. Dissolved. Daniel looked out over the hills. Feels strange, doesn't it? She smiled. Strange, but right. They walked to the gate together. The same gate where it began, now freshly painted, no signs hanging from it, just a small brass plate that read, Cooper Ranch, Est, 1954. Ellen turned to leave. You ever think you'll forgive them? He thought for a moment. Maybe someday, but not before breakfast. She laughed, got into her car, and drove off. Daniel stood there a long time, watching the sun dip low. Somewhere beyond the ridge, thunder rolled, a reminder that even calm skies can turn. But for now, the land was quiet, and it was his again. Summer heat settled heavy over Willow Creek the day the verdict came down. Daniel waited outside the courthouse under the wide awning, hat in hand, eyes on the flag snapping above the roofline. The courtroom doors opened, and Ellen stepped out, her usual calm edged with quiet triumph. Guilty, she said simply. All counts. Fraud, forgery, and falsifying public records. Inside, the judge had sentenced Marjorie Vale to 6 years in state prison, restitution to every homeowner, and permanent disqualification from any fiduciary position. Her husband received 4 years for laundering proceeds through Pine Ridge Estates. Susan Vale, the notary, pled down to probation after testifying about how her mother had ordered the forgeries. When Ellen handed Daniel the certified judgment, he stared at the raised seal for a long time. So that's it? He asked. That's it, she said. You've got your land, your title, and the record to prove who you are. But victories don't erase scars. For months afterward, Daniel woke before dawn expecting to see trucks on the horizon or envelopes in the mailbox. The quiet felt too clean. He filled the silence with work, mending fence posts, repainting the barn doors, reseeding the pasture. Every nail he drove into the boards sounded like punctuation. It's over, it's over, it's over. One afternoon, as he stacked lumber behind the shed, a car slowed near the gate. A woman stepped out, thin, gray-haired, wearing an old HOA badge. Mr. Cooper? She called gently. I was on the board before Marjorie. I just wanted to say, we're sorry. We should have seen it. Daniel wiped his hands. Seeing's easy. Doing something's harder. She nodded, shamefaced. The county's letting residents form a cooperative now. No presidents, just shared upkeep. We'd like you to be part of it. He smiled faintly. We'll see. Right now, I'm just taking care of fences. When she left, he looked over the hills shimmering gold under the afternoon light. Maybe fences weren't walls after all. Maybe they were reminders of where trust begins. By autumn, Willow Creek was rebuilding itself. New neighbors arrived, curious but cautious, asking Daniel for advice on deeds and surveys. He showed them how to check county maps, how to record documents properly, how to keep copies in 3 different drawers. Paperwork's the real fence line, he'd say. Rick Holloway visited again to film a short segment for local television. The piece aired under the title, The Man Who Beat the HOA. It opened with Daniel leaning on the barn rail, hat pulled low, sunlight glinting off the restored brass plaque. The clip went viral within days. Letters poured in from every state, people fighting their own small wars with bureaucracies, thanking him for reminding them that persistence could still win. Daniel read one message that hit home. It was from a teenager whose grandparents had lost their house to a paperwork error. My grandpa said nobody ever fights back. You proved him wrong. Daniel printed the email and pinned it next to the old yellow notice, the one that had started it all. Winter rolled in clear and cold. On the anniversary of the day he found the for sale sign, Daniel built a fire in the barn stove and brewed coffee strong enough to cut through memory. He opened his leather folder, the one holding the original deed, court orders, and Ellen's closing statement, and read the first line out loud. Title reinstated to Daniel Cooper, sole owner in perpetuity. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and steady. He stepped onto the porch, mug warming his hands, and looked across the land. The fences stretched straight, the barn roof gleamed with fresh paint, and the gate stood firm with no sign nailed to it, only a new wooden board carved by Daniel himself. Some lands are earned twice. He smiled at the words. His grandfather would have liked that. Later that night, he sat by the lamp and wrote in his journal. They sold my land while I was gone. But they didn't understand. You can't sell roots. You can forge ink, steal paper, twist laws, but you can't fake legacy. This place remembers who tends it. When he closed the book, the barn owl hooted once from the rafters. The sound carried through the still air like a benediction. Daniel leaned back, eyes half closed. The war was over. But the story would keep traveling, told in coffee shops, online forums, and every small town where someone fought to keep what was theirs. Because, as Ellen had said the day of the verdict, justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just stands its ground, and so it did.